All right. You are listening to KVCM.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. In retrospect, it's remarkable.
Oops, I don't know what that was. I guess my show is so hot, even Tucker Carlson wanted to get some airtime. Sorry, Tucker. You're going to have to wait till at least next week. You're not part of tonight's show. But as I was saying, you're listening to KVCM, Kangaroo Victor, Mango Charlie. We're broadcasting to 95.1 on the FM dial if you're in Los Angeles. We're streaming live at kvcm.live on the internet. And if you're on Twitch, we are on the Monarch Radio channel, the username Monarch Radio. And welcome to Politics Alive with Neil, broadcasting from deep inside the belly of the beast, New York City. Fighting the liberal Leviathan with nothing more than thoughts, ideas, and a love for America. Politics Alive, the show for patriots, but Democrats are welcome here, too. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. But if this is your first time, strap in, sit tight, and be prepared to be awoken from the hypnotic dream state forced upon us by the lotus eaters in the mainstream media. All right, we got another great show. I believe we have our previous host might still be sticking around. If the great Joe Bennett, we have a couple longer pieces, but before we get to those, if Joe's available to talk, I'd love to get your thoughts on this global warming story that just came out yesterday in the European media. Do we have do we have Joe Bennett with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I got a whole new setup this week. Can you hear me okay? I can hear you. So, hey, before I get into all my talk of revolution this week and Mar-a-Lago and all that stuff, I know you're someone that believes that, and I'm not saying this dismissively, I don't believe in it. So I always have a hard time saying it in a dismissive way, but you're someone that believes in the global warming, that it's a big problem, right?
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
Well, very interesting. So you've heard of this, and once again, I have not seen this anywhere in the American media, of course, but it's in the British media. You've heard of this United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Yeah. They're about as conservative as it gets. I don't usually reference their work. There's much better authors out there who aren't influenced and lobbied by ExxonMobil. But have you heard that the rivers have dried up all over Europe? The Danube. I mean, these are rivers we learned about in European history class. Danube, the Rhine, the main river that goes through Germany is almost completely empty now. They can't even put ships through it anymore. Rivers all over China have dried up. The source to the Thames River that goes through London, the famous Thames River, but it's spelled like Thames, but it's actually pronounced Thames. That source dried up 2 weeks ago. I'd say abrupt climate change is here. So
here's some actual
panel on climate change says.
Yeah, I'm not a scientist, but here's what hundreds of scientists have said, and this is sort of funny. Joe Biden just passed the biggest climate change legislation, but here's a little bit of info from the story. So scientists working on the most authoritative study on climate change were urged to cover up the fact that the world's temperature hasn't risen for the last 15 years. A leaked copy of the United Nations report, compiled by hundreds of scientists, shows politicians in Belgium, Germany, Hungary, and the United States raise concerns about the final draft. To be published next week, it is expected to address the fact that 1998 was the hottest year on record, and world temperatures have not exceeded it, which scientists have so far struggled to explain. The report is a result of 6 years of work by UN's, United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is seen as the world's authority on the extent of climate change and what is causing it, on which governments, including Britain's governments, including Britain, base their green policies. But here's the interesting part: leaked documents, as seen by the Associated Press, a left-wing media source, but leaked documents seen by the Associated Press yesterday revealed deep concerns among politicians about a lack of global warming over the last few years. Germany called for the references to the slowdown in warming to be deleted, saying looking at a time span of just 10 or 15 years was misleading, and they should focus on decades or centuries. Hungary worried the report would provide information for deniers of man-made climate change. I wouldn't use that term, deniers. Belgium objected to using 1998 as a starting year for statistics. The United Nations delegation even weighed in, urging the authors of the report to explain away the lack of warming, using the leading hypothesis among scientists is that lower warming is down due to more heat being absorbed by the ocean, blah, blah, blah. The last IPCC assessment report was published in 2007 and has been the subject of huge controversy after it had to correct the embarrassing claim that the Himalayas would melt by 2035. It was then engulfed by the ClimateGate scandal surrounding leaked emails, showing scientists involved trying to manipulate their data to make it look more convincing. And the latest report, which runs 2,000 pages, will be shown to representatives from 195 governments next week at a meeting in Stockholm, who can discuss alterations they want to make. So I'll go on and read a little more, but what do you think? The leading authority, like them or not, is saying that there has been no global warming in the last quarter century, in spite of all the crazy claims. And even if rivers are drying up, it's probably due to poor water management or overuse of water for farming and other sources. But it's whatever is the reason, it's not, the planet just simply is not warming, which is actually a big, also a big embarrassment if Joe Biden just is spending trillions of dollars to fight a problem that now scientists are saying is not even happening. But your thoughts, Mr. Bennett?
Okay, so climate deniers have take advantage of the public's stupidity and the public's lack of knowledge about the El Nino La Nina cycle. And if you, for example, if you have a strong El Nino year, which is what 15 years ago was, I had to look it up to make sure before I said anything. So I'm glad you talked for a few minutes, gave me a chance to look it up. So that was the last strong El Nino year. We've had one or two weak El Ninos since. But right now we're in strong La Nina phases, and then now we're going into a neutral La Nina. And this greatly affects global temperature because it affects how much carbon dioxide the ocean absorbs. So the ocean goes through these cycles where it absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide, and that helps to rein in the temperatures. And when it finally releases, it causes a lot of flooding. It causes a lot in California than usual. So it's, that's how you want to look at it. So you do want to use decades to look at timescales of climate, because you want to include both the El Nino and La Nina years. There generally are more La Nina years than El Nino years. That's just the way the ocean cycle works. It's Mother Nature. We can't do anything about it. It's bad for California because it dries it out. It's good for some other places where it helps keep the rain patterns stable. But We've been in a record amount of La Ninas now, and even with that, where the Pacific Ocean is actually taking in a lot more heat than usual and suppressing it, we're still having record highs around the world. The reason that the rivers dried up in Europe has nothing to do with overuse. They haven't dried up in hundreds of years. It has to do with the jet stream splitting in two, which hasn't happened in our lifetimes up until now. And that's caused by the extreme heat in the Arctic right now. And I guess my question for you is, at what point do you believe it's real? Is it take Miami being underwater for you to go, oh, this is real, or parts of New York City being underwater? At what point do you change your mind?
Well, I'm old enough. I remember, they warned us about this in the 70s. Yeah, they warned us about, actually in the 70s, they said the Earth was going to become just overpopulated and there'd be mass starvation, which never happened.
It is overpopulated. We already have mass starvation. It just doesn't happen in America.
No, there's actually almost, the people living in extreme poverty one time was over half the planet. Now it's down to 9%. So we basically, we've created technology to feed people. But in the 80s, they said we were going to run out of fuel. They said, oh, we've reached peak oil, and then it's just going to be a dwindling. But now they're able to find, with fracking and other stuff, and with the knowledge
we did, and then they developed fracking, and that helped extend our life of pumping oil, which I'm not sure is a good thing. I'm pretty sure it's a horrible thing, because that's what's causing all these problems.
They said we're going
to. Anyway,
but they said we're going to run out of oil. Obviously, so basically every challenge we've had, like technology, has solved it. And then Al Gore started coming around. He said all the polar ice caps are going to be melted, all this stuff. None of that happened.
They are melting.
There's actually more ice in where the polar bears are in the South Pole than there was 20 years ago. And there's actually more polar bears.
Yeah, and there's significantly less in the North Pole right now. And the South Pole is having some weird things going on, and that's... but again, that's why they changed the name to climate change, because it's not always warming. I mean, we had a record cold March in Israel the month that I arrived here for my pod, and it's and we've had a kind of a normal summer here. Last summer they had record high. They broke a lot of records last summer, but this summer actually, thank God, has not been so bad, because it's already very hot here during the summer. It's 94 every day. So I don't think I could take much more. It is. I'm drenched in sweat after being outside for 20 minutes. So it is what it is. It's not going to affect everywhere equally. That's what people don't get. It's
people get it.
Wreaking havoc all over the world, but it doesn't affect everywhere equally.
But everywhere climate, first of all, there's a dismissive term, climate deniers. Nobody's denying there's climate. But basically, here's something else from the report, speaking to your point of decades. So the report, report, and all these countries are freaking out because they want global warming, because it's a big power grab for and the status. So the report will say that the rate of global warming between...
Do you think we're going to have oil forever? I mean, we need to transition to electric. Assuming there was no global warming, we would have to transition to electric cars anyway, because there's not an infinite amount of oil. We bought ourselves a little bit of time with fracking, but this can't go on forever. Assuming there's no global warming, we are out of oil. Don't you agree?
No, because there's a lot of science now that I'm fine with going with whatever technology works. And I'm also fine with electric vehicles, but it's stupid to start phasing out oil while we don't have the infrastructure. California, you can't even keep your air conditioner on in the summer, but they want to say everyone has to drive electric cars. And also, I mean, the current electrical technology, the lithium mines, are ecological disasters. It's also so stupid because most of this electricity nationwide is fueled by coal, which is more destructive. So I'm all in favor of letting the process, over time.
We've been using less coal for years now. We're almost down to, I think, 10% nationwide coal, and we used to be at 50%. So, that's why all the coal mines are starting to go under. Of course, now we're exporting coal to China to prop up their nuclear weapons development against us. So that's good, I guess.
Well, anyway, back to this report. So just so I don't go all over the place, this report is going to say that the rate of warming. So basically, the report says, but they're saying will say because it's not officially released until next week. So the rate of warming, speaking of decades, between 1998 and 2012 was about half of the average rate since 1951. So that's going back 71 years. So yeah, you could blame it on this or that. I mean, ultimately, my final point, this is my final, let me say a few sentences and I'll give you the final word, and then that'll be it. You'll get the final word. But when it comes to global warming, my first question is, is it real? Like, is it really, and I mean, there is climate change, but is it caused by man? And, I don't know. I think the jury's still out, but it doesn't matter. Real or not, let's say it is real. The next question is it bad? And it's, at this point, it's not even going up, but even if it goes up a degree or two, it might be a little bit worse for the people that live in the Sahara Desert. But it will be much better for people that live in Greenland and Iceland and Canada and northern part of the United States. Also, it's more food can be produced easily, so it solves a lot of food problems. So, there could be a shift. There could be, if it even happens, but there's more, there's no debate. There's more people that die from cold every winter, humans, than die from overheating. So is it bad? I would say I don't see the evidence that a 1 or 2 or 3 degree temperature, if it's even happening, is bad for the planet. And then most importantly, let's say both of those are what the global warming alarmists say. Let's say it is real. Let's say it's caused by man. Let's say it's bad. Do their so-called solutions work? And I don't see any evidence that all of these global warming, Green New Deal plans do anything but empower governments and enrich a bunch of green energy companies, enrich sort of their political donors. So it's great for Elon Musk, richest man in the world. It's great for Bill Gates, who's investing in all sorts of things that are quote unquote green. But I just don't see any evidence that all of this stuff in Joe Biden's Green New Deal. I don't see any evidence that this stuff will work. And then just to put a button on it, the other problem with it is, let's say it does kind of work a tiny little bit, but I sort of still say it doesn't. But let's say it does. Let's say you're spending trillions of dollars, literally trillions, by the way, worldwide, multiple trillions of dollars on getting rid of CO2, a benign gas. Then I'm in favor of real environmentalism. So what if we took even half of that money and didn't spend it on CO2, but spent it on real environmental problems like dioxin and lithium poisoning and dirty rivers and actual carbon, like from coal, or actual toxins in our soil, or all kinds of chemical runoff, and if we cleaned up real environmental problems as opposed to this sort of trendy one, I just say, we only have so much money, so why not put it somewhere? We have to prioritize, and I just don't think CO2, a natural gas, is as big a problem as it is. So anyway, that's the end of my thing. I will give you the final word. No rebuttal from me. You have the stage, sir.
Well, we did over 30 feedback loops around the world. The Amazon rainforest is now a net carbon emitter. It used to be one of the biggest carbon sinks in the world. It was considered the lungs of the planet. It no longer is. 90% of the fish and plankton in the Atlantic Ocean are gone. It just came out today that the Alaska king crab fishermen say they're not catching anything. So they went from having a record amount of juvenile crab 2 years ago to having almost zero adults. They say that the catches are down 98% from 2 years ago. So I see the the climate being ravaged all over the place. And I would highly recommend you speak to Aboriginal Alaskan organizations. The Native Alaskans suffering the worst right now of the climate change because it's happening twice as fast in the Arctic as anywhere else in the world. And they've been there for thousands of years, and they speak perfect English. You can call them. They have U.S. phone numbers. Call their organization and ask how has is climate change real, and if it is, how has it affected your tribes and your villages in Alaska? And that will probably be a very long conversation, but I think you should have it with them. That they're the ones who kind of made me aware of how bad it's gotten. And just the rain patterns changing for the worst when I was living in the Bay Area, and then the record fires that we had year after year, and the chest pains that I had, and me having to run down to Southern California just to breathe. And on the way down, a forest fire started that I had to drive by, and they had already shut down the other part of the freeway. I could, if I'd have been there 2 hours later, stranded north of Santa Barbara. So I've seen the record wildfires, I've seen the droughts, I've seen the rain patterns changing in the Bay Area. LA's always been a little bit of a wild card for weather, but the Bay Area has always had really steady rain, and I watched it stop. And it was very scary to see that. In the winter, we had almost zero rain. It was like LA. The patterns are shifting, and they're shifting year to year, and very wildly. Not like when I was growing up. The climate in the 80s was way more stable than it is now. And even before I left Memphis for the West Coast, as I grew up there, we had an inland hurricane. All-time records were beaten. We had the most number of tornadoes in a week in that summer. We had the hurricane itself. It's called the derecho, where we had over 100-mile-an-hour winds. I was on the way to work when it started, and it blew my car around the freeway. And it was like somebody took a pool of water and turned it upside down on my car. And this was 2003 or 2004 when this happened. I'll never forget it, and I didn't even really know much about climate change back then, but these have started happening more and more around the U.S. We're getting a record amount of these inland hurricanes, these derechos, and now we get them in the winter too. They have a different name for them in the winter. I think they call them bomb cyclones or something like that, but that's basically a winter derecho storm. So yeah, the climate's absolutely changing, and it's rapid. And I've heard reports from Missouri farmers. These guys are solid Republicans, and they say we don't even know when to plant anymore. It's so hard to get our corn seeds in the ground because the rain patterns are so unpredictable now compared to how they were even 10 years ago. So, and these people they were interviewing have been farming for over 30 years. These were older farmers, so they see climate change. Like I said, the effects are not the same on everybody. It affects different areas of the world in different ways, but it's a very serious problem. Will what Biden did stop climate change? Absolutely not. The only good thing about the bill that Biden signed is that it'll help us become more resilient to its effects. It'll strengthen our utility grid. It'll add more capacity. It'll, put in more electric car charging stations because we eventually got to get off of oil anyway. It's just a lot of it's about preparing for the future where things do become more unstable, and we just have to be resilient and get prepared for it. And that's a lot of what I saw in that bill. And I don't have anything against the bill. The bill also actually adds pipelines for natural gas and oil as well. That's why
the new 95.1 KBCM Monarch Radio has an all new.
All right, we will be back after the break.
That was weird. Yeah.
When we get back, thanks to Joe Bennett. When we come back, we'll talk about revolution. Is it time for a revolution in America? We'll have a couple competing points of view here on Politics Alive with Neil. And of course, you just heard the wonderful Joe Bennett. Be back in a moment.
95.1 KVCM.
Alrighty. Welcome back. You know what? Let's do a little theme song music to bring us in. All right. We're back. Hey, so we're going to totally shift gears. We had an amazing discussion with one of the other KVCM, Kangaroo Victor Mango Charlie, KVCM 95.1 FM, kvcm.live on the internet. Actually, Monarch Radio is the username on Twitch, but one of our fellow DJs, probably our smartest DJ, talk show host Joe Bennett, and I were talking about global warming. But now we're going to just move, and that was amazing just to get his thoughts, even though I am right and he's wrong. But what can you do? That's me, the lesser smart of the two of us, is opinion. But anyway, we had a fun discussion. But we're going to move on to something completely different. So I just want to compare and contrast a couple of articles that I saw online dealing with, in the aftermath, the FBI, like them or not, or generally speaking, like them or not, I think by all reasonable metrics, had just gone crazy, and the Justice Department is sending teams, 30 FBI agents, some armed with machine guns. They sent a special unit called the Hostage Rescue Team, or Hostage Rescue Unit, or something. So they sent this, to Mar-a-Lago. Meanwhile, Mar-a-Lago is completely protected by Secret Service, so it's already a secure location. But they send 30 FBI agents there in the dark of morning, pre-dawn raid, and it's Joe Biden using his Justice Department to raid the home of his, most likely probable 2024 political opponent. I don't know if you guys remember Watergate, but Watergate, the biggest part of the scandal was some Republican operatives broke into the Democratic National Committee's headquarters and tried to steal some files. So that they were hoping they would find some blackmail information or something they could use against the Democrats. But meanwhile, this is 1,000 times worse. This is the actual Department of Justice, headed by Merrick Garland, who's Joe Biden's appointee, and also Joe. Anyway, going after a political opponent. So that's cuckoo crazy. So in the light of all of this, I just wanted to give some background. But now there's a military historian, this guy named Victor Davis Hanson. So he knows a little bit about warfare and revolution and stuff. Wrote an editorial called "Civil War Porn." So, and the subtitle is "Those who warn most of some mythical civil war are those most likely to incite one." So he goes on to say, so I'll just sort of read parts of this. I may jump in here and there, but this is essentially the ideas of Victor Davis Hanson, historian Victor Davis Hanson. So he says, as Joe Biden's polls stagnate and the midterms approach, we are now serially treated to yet another progressive melodrama about the danger of a supposed impending radical right-wing violent takeover. This time, the alleged threat is a Neanderthal desire for a quote-unquote civil war. The FBI raid on Donald Trump's Florida home, the dubious rationale for such a historic swoop, and the popular pushback at the FBI and Department of Justice from roughly half the country have fueled these giddy Civil War conjectures. Recently, NBC presidential historian and MSNBC commentator Michael Beschloss speculated about the parameters of such an envisioned civil war. Beschloss is a ironic source. Just days earlier, he had so this guy, MSNBC host and NBC also host, he speculated. He tweeted references to the executions of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who passed U.S. nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union in the 1950s, and as a result, they were executed. So he compared them with the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. This was a lunatic insinuation that Trump might justly suffer the same lethal fate due to supposedly mishandling of quote-unquote nuclear secrets. Basically here's a mainstream media elite saying, Trump should essentially be assassinated for treason in the same way that Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were. But here's where it gets cuckoo crazy. That's my words, of course, but a former CIA director, Michael Hayden, so this is a former director of the CIA, picked up on the Beschloss death penalty prompt, adding that it, quote, sounds about right. So we are now at a point in our nation where former directors of the CIA are saying that our past president should be assassinated, and also there's no evidence. So Hayden had also gained notoriety recently by comparing Trump's continuance of the Obama administration's border detention policies to Hitler's death camps. So once again, camps where they were, I guess, holding illegal aliens that Trump continued, that Obama started. He's saying that's equivalent, when Trump did it, to Hitler's death camps. So like the earlier, he goes on to say, Russian collusion hoax and the January 6th, quote-unquote, insurrection, this supposed right-wing inspired civil war is the latest shrill warning from the left about how democracy dies in darkness. Meanwhile, the Pentagon leadership promises to learn about quote-unquote white rage in the military to root it out, but never do they offer any hard data to suggest white males express any greater degree of racial or ethnic chauvinism than any other demographic. When we hear of an insurrectionary plan to kidnap Michigan governor, we discover a concocted mess. 12 FBI agents outnumbered the supposed 4 conspirators, 2 of which were acquitted, and the other 2 so far found not guilty. Also, the buffoonish January 6th riot at the Capitol is often cited as proof of the insurrectionary right-wing movement. But the one-day riotous embarrassment never turned up any armed revolutionaries or plots to overthrow the government. And this is just my thoughts. The January 6th, agree with it or not, and I'm against any violence that happened, it was a bunch of Trump supporters, right or wrong, who believed the election was unfair or that there had been cheating. And they were what they were calling for was a fair counting of the ballots. Now, you can agree that there was fraud in the election or not, but their intention was actually greater democracy, not insurrection. And they might have acted on the wrong information, but actually their intent was pure. And also they were unarmed. So what January 6th did was give the left an excuse to weaponize the nation's capital with barbed wire and thousands of federal troops, 30,000 in fact, in the greatest militarization of Washington, D.C. since the Civil War. And I'll just sort of wrap up with this. In contrast, Antifa and BLM rioters were not one-day buffoons. They systematically organized a series of destructive and deadly riots across the country for over 4 months in the summer of 2020, and 10 months overall. The lethal toll of the BLM and Antifa riots was over 35 dead, $2 billion in property losses, and hundreds of police officers injured. These violent protesters, set the iconic St. John's Episcopal Church on fire, and they attempted to fight their way onto White House grounds. But meanwhile, the New York Times applauded the rioting near the White House with the snarky headline, "Trump Speaks Back." So as far as secession talk, it mostly comes from the left, not the right. And over the last 5 years, it was the left who talked openly about tearing apart the American system of governments, from packing the Supreme Court, junking the Electoral College, and ending the ancient filibuster and nullifying immigration law. So what was revolutionary were new progressive precedents of impeaching a president twice, trying him as a private citizen, barring minority congressional representatives from House committee memberships, including the January 6th committee, and tearing up the State of the Union address on national television. So historic overreach is insurrectionary, not objecting to it, and those who warn most of some mythical civil war are those most likely to incite one. So that was just, hopefully my reading was okay, but that was just Victor Davis Hanson reading about the possibility of civil war. So for the record, I'm not in favor of it, but I do think it is worth talking about. Just generally, all ideas should be expressed. And, when it comes to revolutions, insurrections, call them what you will, is there ever a time and a place for them? And is that time now? So here is, so that was Victor Davis Hanson. The previous one, this is a very interesting guy. It's an anonymous poster who just posts ideas, who goes by the name Beaver Anon. So literally, that's almost sounds like a joke, but I think he has some interesting ideas. Much like when Thomas Paine wrote about, was there a need for the American Revolution? This guy is just presenting some ideas. So let's hear what Beaver Anon has to say. This piece is titled On Revolutions. So when is the right time for revolution? How should it be achieved? So to the first question, when is the right time, there are two answers, the ideological one and the practical one. When it's the right time for revolution, ideologically, a revolution should happen when the nation is ruled by a tyrant or when its leader's incompetence is damaging the nation. And practically, a revolution should happen when there is more to be gained than to be lost. Which is the right answer? The truth is actually both. A revolution should happen if the nation is tyrannical or incompetent, and if there is more to be gained than there is to be lost. Yet, as said, it may be easy to say this. It's not as easy to determine when those conditions have been reached. When are leaders tyrannical? When are they incompetent? When do you have more to gain than to lose? I'll start with the first and easiest one. When do you know you have more to gain than to lose by having a revolution? This one is simply mathematics, yet revolutionaries overlook it. They'll oust their leaders with the belief that, quote unquote, quote, things could not possibly get any worse, unquote. Then things do actually get worse. Evaluate, what services does the government provide? Is there justice in the nation? Who are our enemies? In this case, the enemies of America, and how would they react to a civil war? Can we keep the nation supplied in food, water, fuel, and other goods without the current government? That would be a tough one in America today. In the end, what good is it to get rid of a tyrant just to starve to death, or to replace incompetent leaders with even worse ones? So all the variables must be taken into account before engaging in any revolutionary act. As the saying goes, out of the frying pan into the fire would not be a good thing. So once again, we're just talking theoretical. I am not calling for a revolution. I'm just saying, let's just talk it through. Since the left is saying we're going to have a revolution, let's just brainstorm it a little. So the other reason for a revolution is your leaders are incompetent. So this is seen through calamities, famines, pandemics, immense criminality, financial crashes. By the way, a lot of which we're having right now, yet even those events could be completely out of the hands of the leaders. Maybe Joe Biden has nothing to do with any of those things. So even the most competent leader can't predict, prevent, or end natural disasters, which can lead to these issues. However, one can tell if they are prepared for such eventualities, like has Biden prepared for inflation, how they react to such events. For example, with inflation, did Biden do anything to stop it, or did he increase spending? Also, did they act for the good of the nation rather than their own when those incidents happened? It goes back to the profits loss equation. Can you tell with relative certainty that different leaders would have handled the situation better? If so, then it's time for a revolution. Finally, tyrants. Believe it or not, detecting a tyrant is more difficult than you'd imagine. Even the most benevolent of leaders will have to make decisions which harm a minority to help the nation. To these people, the leaders will appear tyrannical. In other words, there will always be someone, even with the best leader, that will feel he or she is tyrannical. Yet here's the key, isn't it? If the decisions always harm as few people as possible while benefiting as many as possible, then they're clearly not tyrannical. And I would add, if they harm as few people while benefiting as many as possible and follow the Constitution, then they're clearly not tyrannical. So we can define a tyrant as a leader who takes decisions which benefit a minority to the detriment of the nation at large. So once again, the tyrant is a leader who makes decisions which benefit a minority, maybe an elite class, to the detriment of the nation at large. Or even with illegal immigration, he might make decisions which benefit a minority, even of non-citizens, but ultimately by this, letting in millions of illegal aliens, that would be to the detriment. So, just moving on, we can thus state the following. If leaders are taking decisions which benefit a minority to the detriment of the nation, or if different leaders would have definitely be capable of making better decisions, and there is more to be gained than to be lost from a revolution, then it is time for a revolution. Yet, how can a revolution be achieved? People think, this is a super interesting section here, but people think revolution and they inevitably think violence. Yet, it is not always necessary. In fact, most revolutions are nonviolent. We simply call them something else, elections. Yet there are other kinds of nonviolent revolutions. I'll examine three types. The violent revolution, the election, three types of revolutions. So there's a violent revolution, the election, and the quiet revolution. The violent revolution is the one people have in mind when they think, most often think about revolution. Yet it is the least desirable. A violent revolution brings about death and destruction. Simply put, the losses incurred by violent revolution are great and thus will likely outweigh the gains. Still, undesirable does not mean unnecessary. To know if a violent revolution is necessary, ask yourself two questions. First of all, is a revolutionary even necessary in the first place? And is it impossible to have a nonviolent revolution? So if you answer yes to both of these questions, then it's time for a violent revolution. So the first step here, should you find a violent revolution is what you want to do, would be to obtain the collaboration of people who know how to engage in violence, namely the armed forces and the police forces. This is not always possible, yet, and we're just speaking in the general sense all over the world. So this is not always possible, yet if it can be achieved, your victory is assured and in fact will be far less violent. When obtaining their collaboration, however, make sure they have the same goal as you, namely improving the nation. This is difficult to achieve and can only be done through ideology. Yet, it can be done, as history has shown. There have been successful violent revolutions, including the American Revolution of 1776. Once that's done, you should determine what needs to be destroyed and who needs to be killed. You want to avoid attacking the country's infrastructure as much as possible. If it's possible, destroy infrastructures which service the ruling caste you want to overthrow without destroying infrastructures which service the rest of the nation. That's the first thing you should do. Aqueducts, power stations, oil fields, roads, bridges, etc. Destroyed only what you cannot steal or disable. And once again, we're just talking theoretical. As for those who should be killed, there should be two kinds of targets, leaders and followers. Followers should only be killed when necessary, when they attack you or to reach objectives. However, killing leaders, or at the very least capturing them, should be a priority. Many of the people who follow corrupt leaders will give up the fight once they are removed. So in the end, he goes on to say, not my words, he goes, I am no military man and have so little expertise to provide in this matter. If a violent revolution were to be necessary, it would be best for it to be conducted with a man of military experience. Yet, the more, he goes on to say, the more interesting revolutions are the non-violent ones. The first and best type of non-violent revolution, elections. Whether you're a democracy or any kind of republic, if it is possible to remove current leaders and replace them with others through an election, then do that. Rather than explain such a well-known process, I'd rather touch on when it's time to go for something else. Namely, when the voting pool gets limited to candidates which are all incompetent or tyrannical. The obvious answer here would be to present candidates which are neither, yet this is not always possible. So when all candidates are incompetent or tyrannical and it's impossible to present a candidate which is neither, it is time to abandon elections as a viable option. And I would just add to that when elections are no longer fair. That is essentially a time to abandon it. The other method is the quiet revolution. So the quiet revolution happens when the entirety of the population, or so close to make no real difference, stops listening to what the authorities say all at once. This works best if the enforcing bodies, namely the military or the police, collaborate with the population. So at this point, citizens need to build alternate power structures to replace the old ones or compete with them. As time passes, the new, better power structures actually do the job, and the old leaders' authority will wane, and revolution will never be achieved. So he gives a specific example, and then I'll give one of my own. But to give a specific example, let's imagine the government has an office of roads. They manage roads. They do it badly. Now a citizen says, I'll make my own office of roads, and receives donations from citizens and actually starts doing the job the old office of roads wouldn't do. Eventually, people stop paying their taxes to the office of roads and instead start paying them to the new one. The old gets replaced with the new in a nonviolent way. Another example of this that actually happened in Philadelphia was there was a neighborhood with a crack house in it that was attracting drug dealers and teenage prostitutes. The people in the neighborhood called the police for years. The police just wouldn't do anything. One day, just two men in the neighborhood, two fathers, went to the house, told everyone get out, and burned it down. They were arrested, but in a case of people just saying no, they went to trial. A jury would not convict them. Same with there's a famous case of a guy. His 8 or 9 year old boy was kidnapped by a child molester. The child molester kept the boy in a hotel for a few days. The police arrested him. The guy did not trust the police to do it. So while the guy was being escorted by the police, this guy put on a disguise, shot the guy in the molester in the head, and no jury would convict him. So that's not quite exactly what he's talking about, but sometimes the people do need to hijack authority. So having said that, there's much more to be said on revolution, and I suggest you read up on it because it will unfortunately be important in the coming years. Yeah, so read up on revolution. People need to understand that revolutions are necessary, yet they also need to ask themselves two questions before going down the path of revolution. Is it worth it? And can we do it without resorting to violence? If we can educate people in this matter, I am convinced we can avoid many horrors in the near future. Denying the legitimacy of revolutions will not prevent them from happening. It will only prevent people from learning how to achieve them properly. End of article. Let's repeat that. Denying the legitimacy of revolutions will not prevent them from happening. There are legitimate times for revolutions. I don't think we're there yet. I think it's the left calling for it. I will say if the left does start a revolution, fighting them might be called for. Also, if if things keep going in this direction, which they won't necessarily do, it might be time for a revolution. And also, as the article said, the first thing to try is revolution through elections, followed by revolution through assuming the power.
Oh no! Did you miss your favorite KVCM Monarch radio show or podcast? Well, guess what? Our Mixcloud page is back and brand new, updated weekly with the hottest new programs, music, and podcasts. Never miss another show again and stay in the loop with full-length programs you can listen to anytime. KVCM is where content booms. Follow us on Mixcloud at KVCM Live and tell a friend to listen 24/7 to the new 95.1 KVCM Monarch Radio.
All right, so that's another edition of Politics Alive with Neil. Thank you guys for sticking in. Thanks to Joe Bennett for joining the first half of the show. And stay tuned for a fabulous show coming up in the next hour. Details forthcoming.
This is the new 95.1 KVCM Los Angeles Monarch Radio. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of KVCM do not necessarily reflect the staff, faculty, and administration of Los Angeles Valley College or the Los Angeles Community College District.
95.1 KVCM Monarch Radio, LABC.
All right, welcome back. We're getting a little extended. For those that are fans of the Joe Bennett Show, good news. And for those that are fans of the Politics Alive with Neil show, also good news for you, because both of those hosts are going to share this next hour and just do a little mashup of Neil and Joe. Do you want to say hello, Joe?
Yeah, go ahead and play Andrew Tate.
All right, so yeah, we normally do. I just did a half an hour on the need for possible revolution or a response to the left's call for revolution, and then before that, we talked about global warming, and then before that, Joe Bennett show, did some wonderful stuff on disabled people and the music they're able to make. So all kind of serious stuff. So they're sort of under the category of ridiculous. There's this guy, Andrew Tate, and he's a kickboxer, but he's sort of become an internet, he's believe it or not, one of the most viewed people on all of the social influencers. I guess he's the number one person on TikTok, but he is a bit, I guess some people, and I'm not saying they're wrong, would say that Andrew Tate is, a chauvinist. Of which I don't agree, but I think he's sort of amusing and understand that our playing him is not an endorsement of his point of view. I just want everyone to hear this guy. I have my own thoughts, and I'm sure Joe will have some too. So anyway, without further ado, here is, I have a few minutes. I might just play a few minutes and pause it, and we might play a few more minutes, but this is Andrew Tate. A PSA from Politics Live with Neil. Sorry about that. This is Andrew Tate, but he's a guest on the Dave Portnoy Barstool Sports podcast. So once again, here is Andrew Tate.
Are you anti-woman?
I love women. In fact, interesting statistic, 100% of the people I've ever had sex with were women. So I love women. I have nothing against women at all. I'm not sexist in any regard. I'm not misogynist either. I'm a realist. Like, I'm a realistic person. As a realist, in the modern world, they're going to call you sexist, misogynist, etc. But I'm none of those things. I am just.
Why do they call you that?
Because I say the truth.
Which is?
Women can't fight. Men are stronger. Like, based more true things. I think another thing I said is and maybe I'll upset the ladies on the podcast. I hope not, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
Probably will.
I said if I were to get on a plane and that plane was to fly into the eye of a hurricane, there was a 50% chance of it crashing, I'd want a male pilot, because I think that males are better under stress and under pressure. I think they're less likely to get emotional in a life or death situation. That's why they make better soldiers. That doesn't mean that doesn't make me misogynist. That doesn't make me sexist. That's just true. Women are better at other things than men. And I'll sit here and say women are better at X, but I will say that men are better at Y. I'm not going to sit and pretend that we're all the same. We're not. Under pressure, when your life is on the line, anyone who's honest would want a male pilot in said situation. You would not want a female pilot.
So I disagree with that. I think that's a person by person, but I agree with men are stronger than women. I don't think anyone can argue that.
If you're telling me if you were to fly into a hurricane and you had the choice between a male pilot and a female pilot, you wouldn't have zero preference at all, Dave.
Not knowing anything about either of them, they're both pro pilots. No, I wouldn't. We're not talking about dunking a basketball.
Well, I would choose a man, because I know from my own personal experiences that when shit hits the fan and emotions are high and it's life or death, that the man is more likely to remain calm. And calm is what's going to keep me alive. So I would choose the man. For the same reason, I would choose women to do other things. Let me give you another example then, Dave. If gender roles aren't real and you're now...
No, I think there are gender roles are real. That particular example, though, I'm sure you can have great female pilots.
I never said you couldn't. I said I'd choose a man in that particular situation.
Fair. I don't
say a lot of stuff about women, like that they're your property.
That's not what I said. I was talking about an OnlyFans company when question was asked. But I said that if a woman is going out with a man, she belongs to that man. That's his woman. So she wants to do OnlyFans. She owes him some money because she's his. Yes, that's what I said.
That's crazy.
You think if a
that
man,
one's crazy.
So you think that a man going out with a girl that's just your property? There can't be an equal relationship?
No. That one was nuts. That one was nuts.
This is where it goes crazy.
No, that one you can. If I understood what you said, that if a guy and a girl is dating and a girl does OnlyFans, she owes him a cut.
No, 100%.
Girl,
100%.
She is his girl.
But what does that have to do with anything?
Because she's his.
Yeah, so that's
so that is you saying that women are your property.
It's not about being property. It's about the fact that she belongs to him and the intimate parts of her body belong to him because they're in a relationship. And if she wants to sell those, he has a stake in those intimate parts of her body.
So it's reverse. Male porn star owes the woman.
I don't know, because I think the women belong to the man. I think the woman's given over.
That's inherently where you get called sexist.
No, it's not. Well, you can call me sexist if you want, but if you look at marriage, it's the bride's father who gives her away. It's not the groom's father.
In old tradition.
I gotta guess.
The woman belongs to the man.
So is slavery.
Yeah, no, but I got to guess as somebody who's multicultural and everything, that certainly is a tradition that does not apply everywhere.
The woman is always given over to the man. Read the Bible, read the Quran. I'm not saying they're a property. I'm saying they're given to the man and they belong to the man. It doesn't mean they're a pure property without emotion. It means they're given to the man. They take the man's name.
You said it's her parts. You said it's the guy's parts. You're like, if she's on OnlyFans, the guy owns those parts, so he gets a cut.
Well, those parts are intimate, right? That's the whole point of her being his.
Yeah, but you didn't do reverse. When I said if a male porn star does it, he doesn't owe the girl a cut.
Correct, because he doesn't belong to her. She still belongs to him.
Correct. So that's the sexist part.
But and you've also said that you could have multiple partners, but a female that was with you couldn't also have multiple partners.
Well, a woman could say that same thing if she decided. She could say, I can sleep with multiple men, but my men can't sleep with multiple women if she so choose. We're all free individuals, right?
Yeah, but you wouldn't agree if a woman said that.
I don't think I would personally find that revolting, correct? But there are women who find what I say revolting.
So you're not telling other people what to think. You're just saying how you think.
Yeah, I mean, if I think if a man is sexual is not sexually exclusive. It's not the same as if a woman is, because with a woman, you have the paternity issue. With a man, you don't have a paternity issue. If I have 3 girlfriends and they all get pregnant, we know who the mother and who the father is. If you have 1 woman and 3 men, you don't know who even the parents are if she got pregnant. So
all right, so we'll pause it there. So before I get into debating any of his points of view, I'll just ask Joe Bennett, do you think, obviously that's a sexist comment or two, to say the least, but are we at the point now where just any opinion, I mean, obviously you can express anti-white opinions online, that's fine, but should he be banned? Like Facebook kicked him off, Instagram kicked him off, basically all the services kicked him off. Should we silence people that are not hip with the modern approach of sexuality? What do you think, Mr. Bennett? Or maybe you agree. I
think he's irrelevant. I mean, I don't know why they're making such a big deal. First thing, just because somebody has a really weird or stupid opinion doesn't mean he should be kicked off of social media. That social media is full of idiots. I mean, you ever read the comment section? So I don't know why they, he's not, it's not like he's advocating for some kind of felony. I mean, he's, or promoting terrorism. Like he just has some, a little bit of an archaic view about opposite sex relationships. So what? I can't believe that this is this is the kind of that could get you banned. That's censorship going too far. He should be able to say whatever he wants, that as long as it's not, doing something really, really illegal, like promoting terrorism or something of that nature.
Well, speaking of which,
he's just. I don't agree with what he says, but he should have his right to say it.
Well, the head of the Taliban has a Twitter account, and he has not been kicked off.
Oh,
and also the head of Iran, as you know, the
head of Iran, Khomeini, and he regularly threatens to, nuke America, nuke Europe, wipe out all the. He'll just go after an ethnic group. Sometimes it's Jews, sometimes it's the Baha'i. Any ethnic group he doesn't like, he talks about just killing them all. And Twitter doesn't, because he's saying it in Persian Farsi. And I guess nobody at Twitter can, speak Persian Farsi, but you can hit translate tweet and see what he said in English. And if I said what he said, I would be kicked off of Twitter for life.
Of
course, I would never say what he said because I don't think like him. But it's amazing what they let people get away with. If Adolf Hitler had a Twitter account, Twitter wouldn't do a damn thing to him.
But meanwhile,
but if a normal person would say the same exact genocidal things, they would get banned permanently.
Or if literally didn't say anything bad, but just they want to attach. I don't even know why, but Facebook and Twitter, basically all of the Instagram, all kicked. They kicked Donald Trump off. I don't even know why, but apparently they said he was a terrorist threat. Meanwhile, the head of Iran, which just congratulated the guy that tried to assassinate Salman Rushdie, is allowed on.
He may have succeeded. Salman Rushdie's not out of the hospital. We still don't know if he's going to live through this.
Yeah. And I guess he was in New York. Yeah. So it's, so I don't, so that's not a direct thing, but it's the result of a fatwa. He basically offered a reward, a commandment to kill this guy, not him, but it remains. So
the Iranian government offered a cash reward on top of.
Oh, did they? Yeah,
I
wasn't sure. Yeah, I didn't want to speak out of turn because I just wasn't sure.
Quite a bit of money. Yeah, I wonder if they're going to pay him. I wonder, maybe he can use it in jail to, buy extra soap. I don't know.
Or
I
protection.
don't think he'll ever.
I mean, to be honest,
I don't think he'll or protection. Yeah, I don't think he'll ever see freedom again. I think he just ruined his life for nothing. Went to Lebanon, and they're so poisoned in Lebanon by hatred. They're so poisoned by hatred in Lebanon that they have refused to do natural gas drilling offshore in their country, not because they're environmentalists, but because they would have to recognize Israel. Because you can't do business in a country that doesn't recognize its own borders with other countries. Because then you could get into a thing where you're drilling, in military violation, international law violations. So because they were so full of hatred towards Israel, they bankrupted their own country, and now they've crawled to the table on their hands and knees. They don't even have regular electricity anymore. They're living on UN handouts to feed their people. And now they're like, oh, I guess we can negotiate a maritime border with Israel. So, yeah, I mean, hatred is a hell of a drug, man. You see it here in the Middle East. Makes people crazy. Makes people do things that are totally self-destructive.
Yeah. So it's
I feel sorry for Rushdie. The book that he wrote in the 80s, look, somebody needed to write it. It's just the book is an alternative hit. Do you know about the book?
I know it's
the Satanic Verses.
Yeah, but I don't know what it's about. I just know that I've read reviews.
It's the alternative. Well, it's stuff that was compiled that supposedly the Prophet Muhammad said. But this stuff is hidden from the Muslim world. It's stuff about him saying that he felt like he was possessed by a demon.
Oh yeah, I've read
and
that.
all this other stuff, and it's in this book. And just for him writing, I mean, this stuff has been out there for 1,000 years. This is not new.
Yeah.
Islamic scholars are well aware that supposedly the Prophet Muhammad said to his wife, like, I feel like I'm being possessed by a demon, and this demon is talking through me. Like, I don't know if I'm a or something like that. And
yeah, I've read that.
And so that's in the book, and that's why they wanted to. They're like, you're distorting Islam. No, he's telling the truth, and Islamic scholars know it's the truth, including Khomeini, the guy who put the fatwa out on him, who's dead, by the way.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what happens. You put a fatwa out on other people, and then you die. That's karma. But it's just like, yeah, anybody that does a deep, I mean, I found that stuff without even knowing about Rushdie's book. I found it from an Islamic scholar in America talking about how creepy some of the things were that were said by the Prophet Muhammad. And
yeah, and even if he didn't say yeah. I mean, I believe that they were, but also on some level, history. But there's something I have read called a couple things, just so we don't limit it to any. There's something called the Apocrypha, which is books of the Bible that were cut out, and then in the Apocrypha there's stories, nothing shameful, but there's stories of. Like when Jesus was a little boy. So there's a story of like Jesus with a little boy, and he found a dead bird and he picked it up and brought it back to life. And then there's a story of like he was doing something, and like basically he got mad at some other kid, and he just sort of shot some Power Rays at him and killed him on the spot. So whether or not that's whether or not any of it's true, but whether that's true, or just somebody made that story up and added it, and they were like, "That's silly." It doesn't matter. It's an official story that existed, for thousands of years at this point. And then just so we're also, you might not have heard of this, but you might have, but there's a lot of, one of the most famous rabbis, Kabbalist, is this guy, he's dead now, Yitzhak Kaduri. So he died, he was 108 years old. It was the largest funeral ever in Israel. And he was, just hugely influential rabbi, and by all measures, like a good guy. So he said he had a vision, or he had an experience where he met the Messiah. He knew who the Messiah was, and he had done a bunch of, he's known for being predicting the future. So he says he wrote the name of the Messiah on a piece of paper, and he told his followers, a year after I die, go to my wherever it was, and you'll see who the Messiah was. So long story short, he wrote that it was Jesus Christ. He wrote, the most famous rabbi to that point, in modern history, wrote Yeshua, which was the Hebrew name for Jesus. So of course there was understandably, like in the Jewish community, there's huge effort to hide this. So there's always an effort by religious leaders to cover up things that that go against the orthodoxy. But meanwhile, as far as I know, there's no Jewish religious leaders calling for the death of anyone, and there's no Christian leaders calling for the death of anyone who talks about the Apocrypha. You can buy Bibles with the Apocrypha in it. So, I mean, this is kind of self-evident, but it is crazy that, and also the Book of Mormon, completely blasphemous, but there was never a worry like, oh, shoot, the Mormons are going to plant a bomb at the Book of Mormon on Broadway. But meanwhile, do a comedic play about Muhammad mocking Islam, and you'd be blown up the first night. So yeah, it is a problem. Not all religions are the same.
No, and if your religion is openly advocating violence in the last few decades to the masses, no, it's wrong. It's and that's a corruption within religion that they should be talking about, like, and this is what I've seen with Islam that I really don't like, is that they say Judaism and Christianity are corrupted. That's true. But then they say they're perfect. That's false. No, all religions are corrupted because people are corrupt. And people are the ones that wrote these books. So, and people made the decision what stayed and what went. Yes, that's why you have the Gnostics in the New Testament who wrote that Jesus was married, and and that he had children, but the Catholic Church didn't want that because they didn't want a lineage from a Messiah figure, right? Because then the Pope has no power. Now people are going to look to the lineage of Christ. So there's all sorts of issues that come up with how these stories are twisted to where Jesus is magically celibate, even though all Jewish men of his age are married at that time in history. So clearly it's more likely he was married and had children.
And also, it could just be, because I grew up Catholic. I went to we have religious class. I don't know if we had it every day, but we went to Mass during the week. And the Catholics never officially said he wasn't married. They just didn't know. So they sort of, the assumption was he wasn't, because it wasn't there. But if you go deep in the dogma, so was that for and I'm not defending them, but it could have just been like, well, we don't have any evidence, so we're just going to assume he's not. I will say that priests used to be able to be married, and they ended that because they didn't want the possessions of the priests going to the children of the priests. So that was a materialistic reason for the priests becoming, basically, celibate or not getting married, because they didn't want, that they wanted the church's property to be the church's property. kept it simple. But yeah, there's all sorts of weird stuff. I mean, if you dig into it, there's a Catholic saint that said, I guess presumably in visions, but she said she had sex, like Jesus appeared to her and they had sex, and then also he removed her heart, and then replaced it with his heart. So a bunch of just weird stuff. But I can talk about that on this show about the Catholic saint. I'm not no Pope Francis isn't going to put a hit out on me. So yeah, so it's a little bit cuckoo crazy. So anyway, but basically, but back to our original thing, and then I'll let you take the next topic. But yeah, basically, what this guy Andrew Tate said, for all of his silliness, was still less sexist than just most or any conservative Muslim, or in some ways sort of extreme Catholics or Orthodox or Hasidic Jews' views on women too. But I guess because he just said it as sort of alpha male Chad MMA figure, it's enough to get him banned. All right, so we're coming up on the break. I might just do a minute or so of music, Joe, just to kill, unless you want to end it. But then when we come back, I'll open it up to you, and you'll come up with our topic. Does that sound good?
Yeah, it sounds great, man. Go ahead.
All right, so we'll play some music that'll take us into the break. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Politics Alive with Neil. Stay tuned. We'll be back next week at the same Politics Live time and the same Politics Live channel.